2 little words. That's all it took to start a viral revolution that has reshaped how millions of people think about confidence, boundaries, and showing up for themselves. Now, those 2 little words are let them. I'm Sammy Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. Hello, and welcome back to Social Currency, where we break down the business moves, the cultural forces, and the people who are shaping the headlines. If you've opened TikTok or Instagram in the past year, you've probably heard of Mel Robbins by now. She's a motivational speaker, best-selling author, and creator of the uber successful The Mel Robbins Show podcast. And very likely, you've heard her talk about this let them philosophy. But what you might not know is how Mel Robbins turned a series of bite-sized sticky ideas into a massive global brand, a movement, and a highly successful content empire. Today, I'm going to break down how Mel Robbins built her empire, what makes her so effective, and why her frameworks from the 5-second rule to let them resonate so deeply with people. She's a mixture of a mom, a sister, and an Oprah. And she's built a career and empire that is super impressive with tens of millions of followers across social media platforms. Her differentiator is her approachability. She says, I love you at the end of her podcast episodes. So her listeners feel as though they may have learned some lessons that could improve their life. And they also feel supported and seen by Mel. By the end of this episode, you'll see how simple ideas delivered with authenticity can build incredible momentum. Whether or not you aspire to build your own company someday or media platform like Mel, I think that there's an aspect of her journey that will definitely be able to apply to your life in some way. All right, so let's dive in. When you look at Mel Robbins today, she's a best-selling author, global speaker, and basically a motivational powerhouse with one of the most recognizable names in media. It's easy to think that she always has been this confident, unstoppable force. And no, she is not related to the motivational speaker Tony Robbins in any way. That's actually what I thought at first when I initially found out about her, but completely unrelated. But what makes Mel stand out isn't just her success. It's how she got there and how she openly talks about the messy parts. Mel didn't start off as a self-help superstar. In fact, she was a criminal defense attorney, and then she pivoted into TV commentary on CNN. But behind the scenes, she was battling anxiety, financial stress, and a near rock bottom moment in her personal life. And what's also remarkable about her journey, and most people don't realize this since she's had explosive growth in her audience over the past few years, and I only found out about this when I was doing the research for this episode, but she actually had her own talk show in 2019. It was called The Mel Robbins Show, of course, staying on brand since her podcast is The Mel Robbins Podcast. And if you're curious to see what it's about, you can actually watch parts of the episodes that are still featured on the show's YouTube channel. And it was canceled after 1 season. So just 6 years ago, Mel Robbins had a TV show that was canceled after 1 season because of weak ratings. And now she's literally at the top of her game. So I love hearing stories like this because it really is a reminder that we create our own trajectory. And she didn't let that cancellation after 1 season slow her down. She let it fuel her. And she continued to focus on building her channels and connecting with her audience in spite of it. And just 3 years later, she launched her Mel Robbins podcast in 2022. And now it's 3 years after that. And it's one of the top podcasts in the entire world. As her platform grew, her honesty became her superpower. Because here's the thing, Mel doesn't try to talk at her audience. She actually talks with them. She sounds more like a straight shooting Midwestern aunt than a polished TED Talk robot. And in a world that's flooded with self-proclaimed experts, that kind of real talk really cuts through the noise. She's made people across all ages, races, and backgrounds feel seen. And when she talks about failing, about restarting, about doubting herself, it doesn't feel scripted, and it really builds trust. In a social media world built on highlight reels, Mel Robbins has built her empire on telling the truth about her own struggles. And she didn't just stop there. Mel has said her ADHD and dyslexia made it tough for her to learn the traditional way. And so she became an incredible freestyle communicator, learning to speak in very quick and memorable bursts. And that challenge became one of her greatest strengths and turned her into one of the most relatable voices in personal growth today. Mel describes her mission as turning the comfort of taking a walk with a friend into her media presence, making her audience feel deeply seen and heard. All right. So that's where Mel's story starts. It was raw, imperfect, human, and deeply relatable. Next, let's look at the single idea that made her a household name all around the world. It started with a painfully simple idea called the 5-second rule. So picture this. Mel was in a dark place in her life. She was feeling really stuck and anxious. And then one day she sees a rocket launch on TV and she thought, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And that random moment sparked an idea. The next morning, instead of hitting snooze, she counted down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and forced herself out of bed. And it worked. It was the smallest possible nudge, but it broke her out of her pattern of hesitation. And she kept doing it, using the countdown to make calls, to get out of negative spirals, to push through procrastination. And she started teaching it to other people. And she discussed this technique during her famous 2011 TED Talk, which essentially changed the trajectory of her entire career. That tiny practice turned into a huge lever for her brand. The 5-second rule TED Talk went viral, and she was able to turn this into a best-selling book and a philosophy used by millions of people worldwide. And why did this happen? Because Mel understands something powerful that truly sets her apart from other public figures or thought leaders, and it's this. Complex advice doesn't stick, but a simple, repeatable framework does. Think about it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go is short, is memorable, it's actionable, and it's free. It cuts through the excuses. And that's the brilliance of Mel's style. She distills big ideas down into sticky sound bites that people can instantly remember. And that skill has carried across everything she does, whether she's teaching how to set boundaries or manage anxiety or rebuild your confidence. Mel's gift is taking complicated, heavy topics and turning them into bite-sized scripts for anyone to use. And people are always looking for ways to become the best version of themselves. And Mel's simple frameworks are refreshingly straightforward, but they pack a punch. And once she realized that she could turn this 5-second rule psychological hack into a major revenue stream with multiple media assets, she realized that she had a repeatable strategy that she could apply to her next viral idea. She then doubled down on the same strategy a few years later in her career, but the next time she was able to amplify it even more. All right, and that brings us to how just 2 little words took Mel's empire to a completely new level. If the 5-second rule was Mel Robbins' first global spark, then the let them theory is what solidified her status as basically a household name. So let's break it down. The let them theory sounds almost too simple to be profound, but here's the magic. Mel realized that so much of our stress comes from trying to control what other people think, say, or do. And that anxiety is exhausting. So instead of chasing approval or explaining yourself endlessly, she tells you, let them. Let them doubt you, let them misunderstand you, let them talk. Because at the end of the day, you can't control anyone else, only yourself. And this philosophy spread like wildfire. Why? Because it's short, relatable, and instantly applicable. In a world where everything feels so complicated, the let them theory was a mental permission slip that people could actually remember. It wasn't just a viral phrase, it became a movement. People stitched it on TikTok, they made journal prompts about it, they shared it with friends who were struggling to set boundaries. Mel turned Let Them into a best-selling book, a new branch of her business, a live tour, and basically a rallying cry for anyone who's ever felt crushed by other people's expectations. And this is the brilliance of Mel Robbins. She doesn't just share these frameworks once. She repeats them, reinvents them, and weaves them into every platform that she touches. They become repeated across different media platforms so that her audience has heard the same saying, but in different scenarios with different people. And these bite-sized mantras are perfectly designed for social media where shareability and speed matter most. And let's be honest, these short phrases stick. They're like brain glue. And they spread because people can remember them and teach them and remix them. And since this phrase is so simple, I also want to talk about the slight controversy around this theory. So Mel has faced a handful of accusations of not fully acknowledging the prior work of Cassie Phillips, who created a viral poem called Let Them in 2022. Phillips' poem conveyed a similar message of focusing on personal worth. And Mel's claimed that the Let Them theory comes from different different philosophies and readings. Of course, there's the serenity prayer and radical acceptance. And honestly, I think that this controversy is a little bit silly because obviously Mel wasn't the originator of this idea, but what she absolutely deserves credit for is popularizing this term and making it mainstream, because she really does have a superpower for being able to simplify concepts and create virality around them so that these terms eventually get mainstream. Next up, we'll talk about how Mel uses different platforms from TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, podcasts to keep these ideas moving and growing every single day. So how exactly does Mel Robbins keep these messages so fresh and so visible across every corner of the internet? It's not an accident. It's a meticulously executed media strategy. And Mel is a master at adapting her message to each of her platforms. Her content is perfect for social media because it can instantly be clipped into smaller 60-second videos that have simple yet high-value ideas. Now, over on LinkedIn, her vibe is more professional. There, Mel leans into thought leadership, deeper essays, and frameworks about work confidence and overcoming self-doubt in your career. It's the same voice and same authenticity, but it's adapted to that audience on LinkedIn. And this is a huge takeaway for anyone building a brand today. Mel doesn't just copy and paste. She experiments with her content all of the time. She's constantly trying out new things. She tries different lengths, different tones, different posting times, and then this is key. She watches for what takes off and then she doubles down on it extremely quickly. She's basically running a lab for personal development ideas. She's always testing, tweaking, and evolving. And that's why her content always feels relevant, because she's never afraid to pivot or remix or try again if something flops. And this is how she's able to stay as relevant as she has been. And it's all working for her. Her mantras, the 5-second rule, let them theory, even things like making your bed or high-fiving your reflection, these all went viral because she packaged them in a way for each platform to digest. And behind the scenes, she's constantly refining and learning what hits. She meets people where they are and then gives them the tools that they can actually use. Let's zoom out for a second. Mel Robbins didn't just become successful because she had this one good idea. She's built an empire on 3 pillars: authenticity, simplicity, and experimentation. First, the authenticity. Mel talks about failure, shame, anxiety, a lot of the things that personal development people would rather hide. That honesty builds trust, and people know that she gets it because she's been there. She's been able to straddle this line of being an authority and thought leader while also sharing vulnerable moments that really make her approachable. So she's less like a teacher and more like a best friend. And second, there's simplicity. She turns complex topics into sticky sound bites. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let them, high-fiving your reflection. These ideas are so simple that you can remember them in the middle of a tense moment. And that is what makes them powerful. And third, experimentation. Mel is relentless about testing what works, what doesn't, and what might be worth tweaking. From her podcast to social media platforms, she's basically a content scientist willing to fail publicly until she figures out what works. And I think those 3 lessons are relevant for all of us, whether you're building a brand, a business, or just trying to build your confidence. So here's my challenge for you. What tiny frameworks or mantras could you use or even share with the world to make things a little easier, a little lighter, or a little more powerful? Think about that. And if you want, share it with me. DM me. I love hearing these because sometimes the best ideas can start as just that tiny spark. And that is a wrap on today's episode of Social Currency. I hope the Mel Robbins story sticks with you and reminds you of the power that you have to change your life. Whether it's launching your own business, experimenting with your own content, or just showing up more honestly in your own life. And if you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with a friend. And don't forget to connect with me on social. I always want to hear what's resonating with you on this podcast and what you want to see more of. So until next time, remember, sometimes the simplest ideas can make the biggest impact. See you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammy Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammy Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.